called Chris Farfoy.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair, for letting me speak to Part 2 of the Social Security Benefit Categories and Work Focus Amendment Bill. And Mr Chair, this is the kind of bill that you bring into Parliament when you've got the worst economic record in 50 years. When you've got the worst economic record in 50 years, this is the kind of bill that you bring in if you're trying to lay the blame somewhere else. So instead of dealing with the highest unemployment rate since Bill English was last the Finance Minister, or dealing with the 50,000 Kiwis that have gone to Australia since this National Party has come into government, or the 50,000 more people who have become unemployed since this National Government has come into power, this is the kind of bill you bring in to try and blame somebody else. And Mike Sabin, the last government speaker on this bill, talked about this side of the House not supporting any pieces of legislation that have come in to enthuse job creation since this government has come into power. Well, exactly as Mr Andrew Little said, it would be nice to see something. It would be nice to see something. It's very rare to see a piece of legislation come into this House from that government that increases job creation. And the evidence of that is the unemployment rate since this party has come into government has stayed high. It hasn't gone down in a huge way. It said it would create a brighter future for Kiwis, but unemployment has stayed high under this John Key-led government. And the only jobs that have been created around this bill are the jobs of the people who perhaps were in charge of the focus groups that made sure that this piece of legislation came to this House. Another thing that Mr Sabin said was that this is a bill that helps create the business conditions to help create jobs. And there's maybe a question that I'd like to ask to the Minister and the Chair. In this vast volume of this bill, where it says that it helps create the business conditions to help create jobs, because I don't see anywhere in this bill that says it helps create jobs. I know that it cracks down on a lot of Kiwis who would prefer to be working, who are slugging their guts out at the moment to try and get work, but who are being supported by Social Security. It says a lot about smacking them down, but it doesn't say anywhere in here to support Mr Sabin's assertion that this bill helps create the business conditions to create jobs in New Zealand. And it's a serious question I would like to put to the Minister and the Chair. If he can point to the relevant parts of this legislation, especially in Part 2 as we're debating that, where it does create some jobs, because I don't see that anywhere in this bill. Mr Chair, also, my colleague Dr Rajan Prasad spoke about creating an environment where we can create jobs. We won't disagree with the other side of the House. We want to create an environment where jobs are created, but this bill in no way goes anywhere near that. And I want to talk about, again, the fact that it's completely lacking any job creation initiatives in it. It doesn't talk about creating any jobs, but also another, and I think miserly and ugly part of this bill is it's going to crack down or place sanctions on beneficiaries if they don't put their children into early childhood education. Now, on this side of the House, we want as many kids who are under the age of 5 in early childhood education. Absolutely no debate about that. We want 100% qualified teachers. They've got a different opinion over that side of the House. But on this side of the House, we want to see as many children in early childhood education that will free up those parents to be able to go and find some work. But this government hasn't created the subsequent amount of places in early childhood education for us to be able to do that. So in that respect, Mr Chair, the sanctions in Part 2 that are carried out against those parents who cannot find a place for their children in early childhood education really expose the smoke and mirrors of this bill. Mr Chair, also around job creation, and I want to speak in a Wellington context because at the last Household Labour Force survey, unemployment in Wellington went up by 1%. So when this government is talking about through this bill that it is another piece of legislation that they're putting through to stimulate job creation, well, again, in a Wellington context, for the city in which I represent, the electorate of Mana, that just isn't happening. That just is not happening. So anything that this government tries to tell you through the legislation that is brought through this House in terms of creating jobs isn't being felt in the communities here in Wellington because the unemployment rate has gone back up. And I think it was Grant Robertson that showed the front page of the Nelson Mail today where 300 people, I believe it was, went for just the one job, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, where 300 people in Nelson went for just one job. And Mr Sabin said, well, this debate has been political. Well, it will get political because this government has done diddly squat to create any jobs in this country. And Nick Smith should be ashamed of the front page of the Nelson Mail today, because what has he done to create the conditions, as Mr Sabin says, to create the business conditions to create jobs, when 300 people can line up for one job in Nelson? And we've heard of other examples where we've got 20 or 30 people lining up for one job. So when this government says that the Social Security Benefit Categories and Work Focus Amendment Bill is creating the business conditions to create jobs in New Zealand, Mr Chair, the bill isn't worth the paper that it's printed on, because this government hasn't delivered on any of those promises that it made at the last election and the previous election. It hasn't delivered on any of those promises that it gave in the last election and in 2008. So when this government brings this piece of legislation in, trying to say that it's creating jobs for Kiwis, it's not. What it is smacking down hard Kiwis who are looking for jobs on benefits, who haven't been given the environment, as Dr Prasad has said, so they can be in work. And I do concur with what Mr Sabin said. If the Children's Commissioner said the best thing that we can do for these people is find them a job, yes, that's exactly what we should do for them. But this government, Mr Chair, has not delivered on that at all. And when you look at that track record from this government back to, I think it was the last time when Bill English was Finance Minister in 1999, you see that side of the House has a track record of high unemployment. So they talk the talk on creating jobs, but for this government and the previous government, where Bill English was the Finance Minister, they haven't walked the walk at all. And on this side of the House, Mr Chair, on this side of the House, Mr Chair, when we talk about the opportunities available for people on benefits under Part 2, this government has walked the walk. And as Sue Moroney has said before, the last Labor government had the lowest level of unemployment in the OECD. So, Mr Chair, this bill will do nothing, and Part 2 and the sanctions placed in it will do nothing to create jobs for those people on benefits who really want jobs. This bill will do nothing. And the fact, what a waste of a speech and a terrible speech. Well, what a waste of an MP in Hamilton, whatever he's from. Because what is this government doing to create the jobs for the people here in New Zealand? 300 people for one job, and this is what the government puts to this Parliament. This government isn't serious about helping create the conditions, or the business conditions to create jobs, Mr Chair, and the sanctions placed in this bill in Part 2 will do nothing to help create jobs. This government has talked a lot about creating jobs. This bill does not deliver, and it has failed, and that's why it has got the worst economic record in 50 years.
Mark Mitchell.
Move that the question be now put.
Sue Williams-Sarah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.